Hi, I'm Georgia.
And I'm Simone.
And welcome to episode 55 of the Hope Book Club podcast, where we gush about books, we talk about literature from a hope-filled Christian lens, and we hope this podcast makes you think, makes you laugh, and most of all, makes you read. In this episode, we're going to be diving into what I think is a great book. It's called The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. It's recently been adapted into a film by the same name. And as always, this is going to be a spoiler-free episode. So if you haven't read it, if you haven't watched it, it's all right. We're not going to be providing any major spoilers.
No major spoilers, although I don't know who sort of had a chance to come along with us recently. We did get to see the film with some Hopelanders, but, you know, very recently got to look at it and have like a wonderful night out with that. But for this, we are going to be focusing on the book. Might talk about the adaptation a little towards the end, because I know that, like, in the very few conversations you and I have had, we actually have some different perspectives.
We do, which is actually quite rare for us.
Very rare.
Which makes great podcast content, honestly. We're like, finally, we don't have the exact same opinions about things.
We actually disagree on something. But first, do you want to tell us about the book?
Yes. The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry is, surprise, surprise, about a guy called Harold Fry. He's recently retired. He lives in a small English village with his wife, Maureen, who seems to be pretty much irritated over everything that he does, even down to how he butters his toast. And then one ordinary morning, the mail arrives, and in the midst of the stack of bills and junk mail is a letter addressed to Harold in a shaky scrawl from a colleague he hasn't heard from or seen in 20 years. Her name is Queenie Hennessy, and she is in hospice and is writing to say goodbye. Harold pens a quick reply. He leaves Maureen to her chores, and he heads to the mailbox. And however, he has a bit of a chance encounter on his way, and someone at a petrol station convinces him that he absolutely must deliver his message to Queenie in person. That the letter is not going to be kind of good enough for how much she meant to him all those years ago. So he begins the unlikely pilgrimage. He's determined to walk 600 miles from his home to the hospice, and he believes as long as he walks that Queenie Hennessy will live. He has no hiking boots. He has no map. He has no mobile phone, no compass, no waterproof jacket. He literally goes with what's on his back. And along the way, he meets character after character who essentially convinces him to keep going, reignites his sense of purpose and promise. And on his way, memories of his own life and regrets from his own life kind of come rushing back, and he's able to process his own loss throughout this journey. It is very, very beautiful book.
But anyway, let's get into it. Harold meets many people. Like we said, so many different people. She writes these incredible interactions. Did you have a favorite one?
Oh, this is really hard, because honestly, like, there were probably like 10 or 12 like quite significant side characters that Harold meets. I did have a favorite, and it's Martina, the doctor from Slovakia. So Harold is about, I want to say about a 10th of the way into his journey. He is kind of walked as much as he can with no medical attention. So like he has bought some Band-Aids, I think, but essentially his feet and his legs, they're absolutely wrecked.
Because we have to remember, he's not even walking in like shoes and socks. He's in like boat shoes.
He's in boat shoes. He has not, according to his wife Maureen, he has not walked further than the letterbox in his life. So we're not talking like a fit man. We're talking about a guy in his like 70s or 70s,
70s, I think.
Something like that. But anyway, so Harold is literally at his wit's end. Yeah. He ends up stumbling to this farmhouse, and this was quite common by this stage. He'd kind of just go to people's houses, ask for a cup of water or just to sit down for a bit. People were like really, really accommodating.
Yeah.
Anyway, he opens the door to this lady called Martina, and she is from Slovakia. It's revealed that she was actually a doctor in Slovakia. She moved to the UK for a better life. She hasn't been able to practice medicine since, which is a whole other thing. And you get to meet an American oncologist that Harold meets a little later.
Yes.
And Harold tells him about Martina. It's like, she hasn't been able to practice medicine. Has that been your experience? And he's like...
And I love those little moments throughout it where she kind of makes this commentary without being so obvious about it.
Yeah. So Martina works as a cleaner, And it's revealed that she moved here with her partner. Her partner cheated on her, had a baby with another woman, and left her over a year ago. But she still seems stuck in that time. She still doesn't refer to him as her ex-partner. It's still very much her partner. You know, this is my partner's dog. This is my partner's, these are my partner's shoes.
His stuff is still all around. It's like she's just waiting for him to walk back in the door.
Yeah. And I think that is a real, I feel like it's a real comparison to how Harold's and Maureen's life was, without going into spoilers, but they've, you know, gone through a great loss in their life as well. And I just feel like this interaction, it was only, I think he stayed for like a day. And it was just this beautiful, intimate moment where Maureen finally convinces Harold, like, let me take a look at your feet. And he's like, no. And she's like, yes, because otherwise you're not going to be able to walk. And she kind of takes off his shoes and takes off his socks and cleans up his feet and bandages them and teaches him how to wrap them. And she offers her partner's hiking boots. And he's like, I don't want them. And she's like, okay, fine. But you're going to have to learn how to take care of your feet properly. So it was this like whole lesson.
Yeah.
He actually listened to her and took advice probably for the first time on the journey. And if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have been able to complete it. So I think it was a real kind of turning point for Harold. He was kind of walking by blind faith until this point. And Martina's like, look, this is great and everything, but you need to actually take care of yourself if you're gonna make this journey and get to Queenie. Like you're not gonna make it otherwise.
Like sometimes you actually have to accept the help around you, even when you're like, you're being strong and you can do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I loved that. That, to be honest, that was actually one of my favorite interactions as well. And I loved the way that, he took the help, but he also had his boundaries and his things that he was like, no, like, I'm not going to take the hiking boots, but I'll take this.
Yes.
And I'll learn how to do this, but,
I'll take the backpack that she offered. She offered a whole bunch of stuff. And he took some of it and was like,
no, not the others.
Leave the others.
And I think that was really, that was, even though it was a small thing, it was like, for him, it was stepping out and doing something, taking help, but still within his own what he needed at that time. But the second interaction I loved was the moment he met Wilf, which was also the moment he met the dog.
Yeah. Oh.
And they sort of almost came at the same time.
It's a package deal.
It was a package deal, and it was this beautiful moment of, and I think I loved the innocence of this very young, I want to say kid, because he basically was.
A kid. I think he was like 17 or 18.
17, yeah. He was really young, and the innocence of animals and pets. And so, for so long, Harold had been doing it on his own. And in barrels, these two things, this animal and this, young kid that you can't say no to.
Yeah.
Right? You have to just accept. And I think for Harold, it was this moment of having to actually take that step of going, okay, I'm actually going to accept what's happening. I can't just it was almost like
adaptable to change.
Adaptable. It was that next moment on from the interaction with Martine of yes, I'll take this and I'll take this, but not this. And then the next step was sort of okay, I guess in this, I don't have a say and I'm just going to roll with it.
And it was clearly what Wilf needed as well. I think in all the interactions up until that, it was kind of like these people offering Harold something that he didn't have. And in this moment, by letting Wilf walk with him, Wilf wanted to, make something of his life, whatever he, needed to walk with Harold for. Yeah. Harold was like, oh, this is something that actually I can offer him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Harold says he's not a religious man. That's very much kind of a continued theme. He keeps saying I never understood religion. I never got God.
Yeah.
And yet his journey is called a pilgrimage for a reason. And I think it is undoubtedly that leap of faith. It really is. How much and how consciously do you feel like the author drew on not only Christian tenets, but also, tenets of other religions and faith as well?
I think absolutely. I don't think that was, pilgrimage is such a unique word to use for this the whole way, right? Yes. In fact, every time I go to talk about the book, I automatically start to insert other words for it because it doesn't naturally like, it's not something we talk about naturally in everyday life these days. But there is something so very specific about pilgrimage, right? But ultimately, I think the main thing, the thing that stuck out for me was one of my favorite quotes in the book. And it's maybe it's what the world needs, a little less sense and a little more faith. And I think for me, that was very deliberate from the author. You know, this is like okay, she's not saying what faith, she's not saying, you know, specific, but she is saying, like, we sometimes come at things so intellectually, so like it has to fit in these boxes and fit what we think and fit the, you know, I want to say science with, like, you know, quotations around it. Sure. But sometimes we just need to go, you know what? Sometimes we need to actually stop, like, let it be a little less making sense and a little more just having faith, just stepping out in faith. And you see that over and over again in this. I don't know. I think there's a lot in this book that was not intentional from the author when it comes to faith. And I think specifically the way that, you know, our Christian faith can be applied to this. But I definitely think there was a fair amount that was intentional.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, for starters, there was a character in the book who mentioned to Harold, you know, this is a modern day pilgrimage. Yeah. And, like, I think that was the first time the actual word pilgrimage was used by like an external character. It was like,
yes,
kind of recognizing that as that this is what it is. And I think what was really interesting to me was, you know, Harold may say that, you know, religion and faith was not for him, but I think through this walk he was able to connect with God, or whatever he thought his idea of God was. You see throughout the book this journey that he takes, and specifically nature just being able to be that connection to the divine. And it provides almost like I want to say like a spiritual rebirth, like a renewal for him. He is not the same person when he started that journey as when he finishes it. And, you know, you can call that, I don't know, it's self-improvement. You can call that faith. You can call it whatever you like.
Yeah.
I like to think that, you know, a divine hand, that God kind of had a say in that. That's what I believe.
It's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, if this was happening, if this was real, for example, right?
Yeah.
There are too many coincidences, too many like moments where he meets the right person at the right time for it to really, for God not to be a hand in it. And I know this is a novel, but, you know, things like this do happen.
Yes.
And you hear stories about it all the time. Like, things like this do happen. And I think, like, that's where you start to see the way that she's really written the way that God does in everyday life. Often come into those moments and, you know, be a part of these pilgrimages that people make.
Now, speaking of deep, dark stuff, we are going to get a bit deeper here. The book does deal with some very heavy topics.
Yeah.
So trigger warnings for mental illness, addiction, death by suicide, things like that. Family trauma and grief also dealt with a lot as well. How well, Sim, do you think it was dealt with, and how effective could it be in opening up those conversations between you know, family and friends, those issues that aren't often talked about?
Look, it is one of those things that I think she deals with it really well. And I love books that will open up conversations about this in ways that don't have easy answers, because it's not easy answers. And I feel like this book, she did really well in, you know, delving into, and it sounds very flippant, but the hurt people. And, you know, when it comes down to it, like, it's not as simple, and she shows how it's not as simple as that. But the fact is, like, family trauma, you know, like, you might, you know, it's oversimplified, but, you know, there's no possible way in a lifetime to not inevitably hurt the ones that you love or be hurt by them.
It's part of the human experience.
It is, right? We are
fallible.
We are fallible, but I feel like she was really good at being realistic, but also showing how and what you need to do to stop creating the same hurt over and over again. And that's where I think, some of the family trauma and some of his memories and his thoughts and just the not having processed things led to the way that he reacts and interacts with the world and the people around him. Having said that, I loved that she didn't place any blame in anything. Like, it still came down, and it was so realistic in that, and I don't want to go into anything that'll spoil stuff, but like, everyone had their part to play in this. Everybody was just living their life and their experiences and coming at things from their own hurt, from their own perspectives, and trying to make it work. And without that, knowledge, and I think one of the things I appreciated was you could see back, like in his memories, the things that, they experienced and went through, and you just think, wow, how different do we have it now with more knowledge, with more conversations like this, with books where we get to see others' perspectives. So for me, I feel like she really did deal with it well. From a Christian perspective, it is hard because, there's a conversation that's missed in it. There's a conversation about how God and our faith plays into our experiences as well. But that's a conversation that can get brought up even just by reading these books.
And I think can very much be read between the lines. Even it doesn't say explicitly, I think, as we've said, there is that element of faith. In the book as well. I agree. I think she dealt with it really well. I don't think it was by any means a comprehensive look into any of these issues.
No.
So don't go into it thinking that it's going to be a real kind of educational tool in terms of dealing with any of these.
No.
I don't think it was touched on as deeply as it could have been. But I think also that was deliberate on Joyce's part, because you see the entire book through the perspective of Harold and Maureen.
Yeah.
And they didn't fully understand these issues as their family was kind of going through them. So you kind of get these half descriptions and these half explanations, and you kind of get these details that maybe allude to one thing, but Harold and Maureen weren't exactly sure what was going on. I think that was deliberate. I think we can make our own conclusions here, and you'll never fully know what
I feel like that was realistic.
Yes, exactly. I think it was portrayed really authentically, especially the grief journey. I think we went on a journey of grief, not only with Harold, but with Maureen as well. I really love her story throughout this book.
Same.
Just incredible. I think they both had a great deal of unresolved grief. And you kind of see as the book unfolds that they really start to genuinely work at that for the first time.
Yeah.
They have sat stagnant, both within their relationship, but also within themselves in terms of this grief. It has just been holding them back in every level of their life. They have just been going through the motions, and nothing's going to change. So I think you start to see them work through that separately, which enables them to then be able to, make a go of it kind of together and reconcile in that way. And I think it just reminds you that people are more than what they seem. You'll see Harold and Maureen's out there every day on the street.
Yep.
You just don't know what people are going through. And I think that was just a really good reminder, almost like a kick in the gut sometimes, because they really do seem like the most ordinary of people, and yet they're going through such deep hurt and pain. And I think that's just what we all go through.
And I think that was even brought more home with Harold, in that he, through even the flashbacks, he would have appeared to everyone like the most ordinary of people. And you would have no idea that, his hurt didn't just start with the grief that they started dealing with. It started well before that. Start of the book, one of the things we talk about Maureen. Now, Maureen has this incredible journey as well.
I love her.
I
love her.
So do I. And one of the things that I do find with her though is they sort of, by the time you sort of meet them, they don't have a lot of friends. They've let a lot of that fall by the wayside. She's living a very isolated life. And we see her, as Harold's connecting with people out in the world, we see her start to connect with people in her world again. And one of those is sort of her friend, the neighbor next door. What do you think, it sort of shows us and how to be a friend during difficult times, because
I think it's quite simple. And I think it's just be there. Just be there.
Yeah.
Ask the questions. Sit with people. Don't expect... Just go in there with no expectations. I think that was what was really great about... I want to say his name is Rex. Is that correct? Maybe.
Yeah, it was something like that.
So sorry. Neighbour next
wrong.
door that might or may not be called Rex. This is why I need the book to cross-reference. I think, he had lost his wife. So he was going through that grief journey. And you kind of see the parallels in... He was dealing with it. He was processing his grief in his own way. He was reaching out in his own way. And to have him kind of take that first step, because he could just... It's almost like grieving people recognize other grieving people.
Yeah.
And he was just able to take the first step and just be like, what's happening? What's happening? And as soon as he did that and she was able to just open up a little bit, everything changed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't overnight, but, they were able to start going, outside of the house. Like, she didn't leave the house hardly ever.
Yeah.
They were able to start going on little trips and things like that. And she was able to talk about Harold, and he was able to talk about his late wife. And it was just able to, just having that conversation. And, sometimes Rex was able to offer advice. Sometimes he was able to offer encouragement, but mostly he was just there to listen to Maureen. And sometimes that's what we all need. So just be there. Just be there, and just reach out. If you even get an inkling that someone in your world is not quite right, the worst that can happen is you reach out and they'll be like, I'm fine.
I loved the way he would reach out, though, especially at the beginning when you could tell she wasn't quite ready. And I think that for me, I loved, because that's it's a very me thing to do, where I'm like, you know what? Like, I just need you to not push me right now. Mm-hmm. and he does that. He does that in a way that is sort of this, like, he just checks in and he asks, but he does it every day. And he finds different ways to come around and check in and ask. And I think that constantly, despite being kind of like pushed back or whatever, like
he's not discouraged.
He's not discouraged by it. And not in a like pushy, like, if you actually don't want me here kind of way. But just keeps checking in and takes that opening when she gives it in a very non-judgmental way. So originally she sort of like lies to him a bit about like, Harold.
What Harold's doing,
what Harold's doing. And so she feels very guilty and she doesn't know. And I love even the way that he responded to that, because it was such a trauma grief like response from her. And he just made that okay. He just went, you know what? We're not going to like, yep, that's fine. I could tell. Let's move on. Like, and I think that's really important too, of like, just, when there is that moment of, response that you can see isn't in the natural nature of your friend or the person that you love, and they're going through something, to just not be offended by it, to like
don't
let
take it
it
personally.
Don't take it personally. It's not you. It's what's going on, and there are limits to that, obviously. Like,
you got to set your own boundaries.
You do. Absolutely. But for the things that don't really matter, just let it go.
Just let it go. Yeah. All right, Sim.
We're finally, the last few minutes, we are going, let's try and keep things civil. But
I don't think we could possibly be uncivil.
Let's talk about that, the book to film adaptation. Now, I do want to mention that the author, Rachel Joyce, did write the screen adaptation.
She did, and which makes a lot of sense now that we know how much
it really does.
How much she's done in that space.
So what would you rate the film adaptation?
What, out of 5?
Yeah, let's go out of 5.
Like 4.5.
Wow.
It's high. Okay. So I sent you I'm actually referring back to the text that I sent you immediately after I watched the movie. Okay?
It was immediately as I was about to go into the film.
Yes, I was unwell at the film adaptation, so I couldn't go. But watched it, and I'm just going to read verbatim. I said I said that it was a near perfect adaptation.
You did.
And I stand by that. I think first and foremost, it showed that kindness is within people.
Yeah.
against the busyness of life and the rat race that we're all living, kindness is there. And when it comes down to it, people can really rally around each other and form true community wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
But I feel like that can only happen when we actually take ourselves away from the distractions. We see Harold literally, took himself out of his own life. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. That's not what I'm saying. But when we really take the time to see people and just slow down, incredible things can happen. I also loved how the movie portrayed not taking more than you need. So Harold travelled light, and I'm talking light. He didn't have a phone.
Yes.
He didn't have proper boots. He never took more than what he needed, and yet he always trusted that he would have enough. And I feel like that is something that a lot of us, especially in the modern world, are missing.
Yep.
We're kind of worried about that scarcity. Worried about the next thing. Will I have enough to pay this bill, to do that, whatever.
Yeah.
Whether that came from nature, whether that came from the simple act of Harold literally walking up to people's doors and asking, can I have a cup of water?
Yeah.
People aren't going to turn him away. No one turned him away.
Yeah.
Not one single person turned him away in that book.
Yeah.
Can I trouble you for a bag of chips or a chip from your bag? I think asking for help is such a great lesson for all of us. I feel like we all, especially in today's world, try and be a bit hyper independent. Speaking for myself here.
Same.
But other people are happy to share. And it really does take a village. I think that was really portrayed well in the film. And lastly, that idea of loving people, but not being able to save them.
Yes.
Metaphorically, I'm speaking, in terms of just themes.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I feel like everyone has a story like that. Harold had great loss in his life, so I feel like he kind of channeled that into this walk to try and save Queenie. He believed that by walking, he could keep her alive. And the girl in the garage, the one that, he met first, she said that no one can save anyone. No. You know that. But we can love people. And sometimes that won't be enough. Yep. Sometimes it will be. But it's what we have, and we have to try.
And I loved all of that. I agree with all of that. I feel like that came through in the book. For me, I feel like having already known the thoughts and the feelings and the everything that like Harold and Maureen were going through made the movie better.
Yes, okay.
And if I sort of took that out of my mind, if I tried to watch the film just as a film, without having read the book first, I feel like there was a lot missed. And
okay, so you're judging it as a film standalone.
But also like then it comes down to, okay, how do they get across what was in the book in the film? And did they do that? Like if you haven't read the book, how does it come across in the film? And I think, look, I think there was a lot of that did still come across, like all of the not taking more than you need, that you can't save people, kindness, all of that, absolutely. For me, I felt like it was probably more of a maybe like 3.5 to a 4. Like it's still it was still a good. Yep. Like I'm not saying it was a bad adaptation. There are definitely some bad adaptations out there.
There are.
And this one was a good one. I wanted a little bit more from it that I got from the book.
I can see that. I think what the feedback that I've heard so far, the people that really, really loved the movie, are those that read the book first.
Right.
So I think, there's only so much that you can fit into an hour and a half, 2 hours, however long the movie was. I think I had tempered expectations, maybe. Maybe I had lower standards because I've been so disappointed by so many book to movie adaptations before.
Yeah. I do have to say though, like if it is such a beautiful adaptation, so like if you don't have time to read the book before and you want to go see it in the cinemas or see the film, do it because reading the book after is still going to be amazing. And it's going to add to your experience of the memory of the film. And having seen the film, I feel like actually with one of those weird times where it can still add to your reading of the book.
Yeah, I agree. And the acting, absolutely brilliant. Jim Broadbent, can you take a bow? It was amazing. Like, seriously, all of the characters were incredible.
He's incredible. And I have just forgotten her name, but the person who plays Maureen,
yes.
She, again, another spectacular...
Katie McDonald, is that her name?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. She was also amazing, because it's not easy to play those roles where so much of it is internal.
Yeah.
So much of what you're trying to show is internal, and so much in the little nuances between being like just harsh or being like in a bad mood.
Yeah, I agree.
And it is spectacularly done.
Her name's Penelope Wilton.
Penelope Wilton, that's
Katie
it.
McDonald is the director. Sorry, I didn't just pull that out of nowhere.
I was like, it sounds familiar, but it doesn't sound like her.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
So, for those of you who have read the book and have seen the film, honestly, we would love your thoughts. Like, let us know via the voicemail or Facebook group if you agree or disagree with what we said. And yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to also answer some Facebook comments that we've gotten about the book over the past couple of weeks. Robin, who is... Shout out to Robin. Also, if you're listening, Robin, we love you. Robin comments on like every post in the
with
in the
amazing comments.
Such
we
amazing
love
insight.
hearing from you.
Now, Robin said that she's in her 80s, and she says, don't let this put you off, by the way. She says, I think the ending is harrowing. I almost couldn't read it. But the power of Harold's faith and belief that Queenie was being healed as he walked, and really... it was his marriage slowly being healed with Maureen. It reminded me very much that God often answers our prayers in unexpected ways and not at all as we imagine.
I love. Shout out to Robin. Like, that is so
much more succinct than I could have said.
True about the book. Like, you know, sometimes it's just not how we imagine, but so yeah, thank you for Robin, and all of you who comment on the Facebook group. We love hearing your thoughts on what you're reading, what you're enjoying. There is a sequel to this book, which is Maureen Fry and the Angel of the North. So let us know if you think we should read that one as well, if we should continue the Rachel Joyce series. Send a voicemail at 029 7025, or you can leave a post in the Hope Book Club group, Facebook group, and you can find all that in the show notes.
And we'd also love this podcast to reach more people. So the way you can do that is rate, review, subscribe, share it with your friends. However you're listening, we'd just love for you to share it with more people. Until then, catch you next time. Stay reading. Sim, you have a quote to end on?
Yeah, so from British writer Mallory Blackman, she says, reading is an exercise in empathy, an exercise in walking in someone else's shoes for a while.
Fantastic. Catch you next time.
Bye.